Hi, everyone. A couple of weeks ago, I got the chance to sit down here at our table with one of the candidates I'm really excited about in the upcoming 2026 elections, Dr. Amy Acton. She's thrown her hat into the ring for governor of Ohio. And if she wins the Democratic nomination, she will likely face Vivek Ramaswamy, who we all know is a Trump acolyte. If you need any other convincing, let me tell you, even if Dr. Acton wasn't facing someone as impressively awful as Ramaswamy, she's a powerhouse for good. Dr. Acton isn't about politics. She isn't about partisan games. She's about getting the job done. And that's why Republican Governor Mike DeWine chose her to be a part of his cabinet and to be Ohio's director of public health. Dr. Acton stood right beside Governor DeWine during his daily COVID briefings, often being a voice of leadership, not just for Ohioans, but for all of us. I'm so excited to announce that I've endorsed Dr. Amy Acton for governor of Ohio, and I'm so thrilled to have her at our table. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to At Our Table with Jaime Harrison. Today, I'm joined by someone who stood on the front lines of science and compassion during one of the hardest moments in our country's recent history, Dr. Amy Acton. You may remember her from Ohio's daily COVID briefings, where she became a calm, a steady voice amid the chaos. She's now running for governor of Ohio, and I wanted to talk with her about leadership, about empathy, and what it means to heal a divided state. Dr. Acton, welcome to At Our Table.
Jaime, it is so wonderful to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, it's so great to be here with you. And let me tell you, I've been really anticipating this interview because we have a mutual friend, David Pepper, who I've known for a number of years. When I was state party chair here in South Carolina, he was the state party chair in Ohio. And he talks my ear off about you. He is one of your biggest fans. If you had a fan club, he would probably be the president of it. But he's very proud of the race that you're running. But he is also just a big admirer of you as a person.
Well, thank you. And David has written a book, as you know, many books, but one of his books really has to do with state houses and how, a lot of us pay attention to the federal race and everything going on there and what's all the antics we're seeing now. We all kind of know our local politics, but as it turns out, our state houses are sort of black boxes where some bad actors and special interests keep pushing stuff through. Because frankly, I think a lot of us don't always pay attention there. And what I've learned from our friend David is that we absolutely have to get that right.
We really do. I mean, the rubber meets the road at our state houses on a local level. And, sometimes we get so federal focused that we
Yeah.
forget that many of the laws, many of the things that impact our day to day lives actually take place in the state house. So, who your state legislator is, who your state senator is, who your governor is really makes a difference in terms of the quality of your life. And I know we're going to get into that. But before we get into the politics behind this, I always like to start with the humanity of who we are and who we want to represent us. Now, in getting ready for this interview, I found that you and I both know what it's like to grow up with very little. The way that we grew up, there are a lot of commonalities there. I've often talked about growing up on food stamps and having the lights being cut off, moments in which, we couldn't afford milk and I had to eat my cereal with water, right? And you've spoken openly also about growing up poor in Youngstown, Ohio, moving from place
Yeah.
to place, being homeless for a while, and surviving real hardship.
Yeah.
How has your experience, that experience growing up in poverty, how has that shaped the leader and the listener that you are today?
Wow, Jamie, I appreciate even the way you led into that because not a lot of people actually describe so viscerally when you say the story about the cereal like that. I go right there. I remember not having heat and having like 10 layers of
Mm,
blankets, trying to stay warm. And there are just certain things that it must be a little bit of a high five. And I'm honored to, in a way, I always watched your story and one of the things when I talk about my childhood in any room I'm in, I always say I'm not the only one in this room who
Yeah.
saw a thing or two in their childhood. It is way too common. In my state, up to 50% of kids are living in poverty in any place I'm at. So I know I'm not the only one, but I did have a rough childhood, as you said. I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, the place of Bruce Springsteen songs and Still Mills that closed, and right yesterday, Lordstown let everybody go, another automobile thing, a big thing in Youngstown in my area. Um, I My brother and I went through a lot of frequent flyer children's services stuff, a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect. People are hearing me talk a lot about the victims of Epstein and others. These are things I experienced as a kid. We actually lived in a tent in the winter in Northeast Ohio, so moved about 18 times that I can count when I tried to go back and count every place I could remember. And finally, at the age of 12, my brother and I were removed from that situation. Moved literally, and I say all this to say, because this is, like, sort of the foundation of everything I've done in my life. I'm almost 60 now, but it's really informed everything. We moved literally a mile away, but lived in an apartment, still shared a bedroom, my brother and I, up through high school, but we stayed in one school for the next 6 years, and then I got in med school, an accelerated BSMD program right out of high school, and so, my life got better. And a lot of times you feel like there's a lot of luck in this, and when you're a kid and you're unseen, you notice when people look the other way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had this experience, like, you see adults seeing what is happening, and you see them kind of maybe not want their kids to play with you or, that kinda thing, 'cause you're different. I think a lot about that in the time we're living in now because, you know, people are overwhelmed. Sometimes they look the other way because they just don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And right now, I've been haunted by the kids that got left behind, that I watched our lives go different ways. I remember people looking the other way, and I've never wanted to look the other way in my career. But the thing is, I learned a couple things from that childhood. I learned that your zip code, like, just moving a little bit into a different circumstance matters so much more than your genetic code, and everything I learned in med school about how well your life will go, what kind of life you will lead. And that childhood also taught me, though, about the people who didn't look the other way. I tell the story of walking to school, my brother and I and this couple pulling us up on their porch and feeding us breakfast because they knew we were hungry. And so part of why I've become the kind of doctor I am, a very unique specialty, and absolutely why I'm running for governor, is because I don't wanna look the other way in this time. I see a lot of people everywhere I go in my state, they are overwhelmed by the hate, the vitriol, the chaos, the pitting against one another, and there is an inclination right now, especially amongst Dems, to kinda, like, there's a survival instinct that's like,
Yeah.
"Just protect myself," "Huddle down." You I saw it in COVID, I saw government workers that I thought would be the ones to lead, like, kinda just hunker down, right? But this is the time we're really being challenged to not look the other way when we see things we can't unsee.
Amy, I often say that I think that poverty often gives you a sixth sense, and that
That's true.
that you can feel when other people are struggling, and even when they don't say anything. Like you can. When I was
Yeah.
campaigning for the U.S. Senate, and there would be crowds of people, you can see in the eyes people who are going through some things, who are hurting, who need help, and they may try their best to hide it, but you feel it. Do you see that when you're on the campaign trail? And then when you see it, what do you do? How do
Oh,
you
that's
connect?
yeah. Jamie, I'm so glad you're saying these things. These are words that not everyone ever says. There are, obviously when you have ACEs scores, which is how we measure trauma in kids, and when you're off the charts, like you're at 8 or whatever, you're certainly gonna have some things you lost along the way
Yeah.
going through a rough
Yep.
childhood. Like, I somewhere in all my moves missed fractions, and every time I do a fraction, I still get a little gulp, even though I've, like, taken advanced calculus and, I still like, you miss things and you don't learn, and I joke that I can't make a decision about what dress to buy, but you get in a crisis, you absolutely want me on your team. Like, I have a whole 'nother way of operating in the world when the hard cards are
Yep.
hitting the table.
Yep.
And what I am seeing going around, Jamie, something happened when I went through COVID with Ohioans. The same thing we're talking about came into play, and I have a bond with people that isn't typically political. It is something else because we were connected through a really hard time.
Mm,
And everywhere we go in Ohio, we are seeing these record crowds showing up. It does not know party. I can't say that enough. And I don't get through a room or a night where somebody doesn't break down in tears. Waiting in line, and you know what I'm talking about. You're
yep.
seeing everybody at the end of talking. While I'm talking, it just happened again last night. There's something about hearing my voice. There's something about what I'm talking about, and because I'm a doctor, not a politician, I tend to talk a little bit more like your doctor would or mom or your friend would, and naming what they're feeling. I have grown big men in line barking at me about something they're mad about, and then I'll just literally watch, like, tears start to come and they don't even know why it's
Yeah.
happening. I can't say this enough for everyone out there listening. We've been going the heck of a lot for a long time, and we are all carrying this inside.
So much
And
trauma,
I think
so much
there's
pain,
so
so much hurt. I mean, Amy, I think about, and not that we want to dwell on COVID, but the one thing that we don't do a great job of in this country is we don't allow ourselves the room to heal.
That is right.
We hide, we don't heal. We hide the pain, and we put barriers on top of it, and we put extra blankets on it, right? Like to
Right.
and we don't heal, and it's in a lot of different spaces, and it's in the racial injustice. We don't we hide and we don't heal. And in terms of the trauma that we experienced in COVID, we hide and we don't heal. But so I mean, you know, we have to connect as people, and when we cut off that connection and we weren't able to connect and we weren't able to do the things, then there was so much hurt and pain and mental anguish that built up.
That's right.
And some of the abuses that were there, the physical abuses, kids who were in abusive homes, now they were stuck in those abusive
That's right.
homes 24/7 instead of being able to get that outlet of going to school, right?
Right.
Kids who could not eat
That's
or did not have food, but
that's right.
would go to school in order to get that outlet, did not have it. And so it amplified all of those things, all of that pressure, all of those pains that people were already in, and it made it even worse. And you were, for many of those folks, one of those voices in the darkness, right?
Yeah,
Trying to
and
lead people towards light. And so I can see why, if I came to a rally and I saw you and I was going through something during that period, and how you really helped save people.
I think people everywhere I go are longing for public servants again that are gonna solve
Yeah.
problems versus make problems, and, you know, it's very easy to keep demonizing each other, and there are a lot
Mhm.
of pressures in this world that are trying to purposely keep us in that state. But, we had a lot going on even before Trump, even before COVID. If you remember, our last Surgeon General actually did a Surgeon General's advisory. That's like when C. Everett Koop did smoking because we have a ton of evidence that's something we could fix. Our Surgeon General actually did an advisory on social connection and isolation and loneliness, that it is the epidemic underlying everything we are experiencing. This was going on a good 20 years of data around the world, and I can't say this enough. You keep going through the things we're going through, and COVID was a perfect example of it. We so desperately need leaders who help us manage the impossible. COVID, and I was a representative for the whole Midwest. I was in the White House. I literally begged Mick Mulvaney right on the brink of this as it was hitting our country, saying, "This is like the Winston Churchill, like FDR moment. We train the whole world on how to deal with this. This is the moment for a leader to step forward to help people accept what's going to be the unacceptable changes that they're going to have to endure in their lives." And you know, when that didn't happen, I remember Mick Mulvaney went like this. 2 weeks later, he was gone, but I flew home, and a Republican governor and me, a Democratic candidate for governor, just made a simple promise to the people of Ohio. We said, "We're gonna tell you the truth as we know it. because we thought people needed the truth, and that comes from childhood, Jamie, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
They left
yes.
you hard cards on the table because you can solve anything or deal with it, but you gotta know the ground you're standing on.
Yeah.
And I think that simple difference, and I know it's been studied a lot about our state, what we did in those early days, 'cause the governors then led, and they helped each other to lead. But the thing is, there was no, first of all, order that was gonna flatten a curve and get us through when we were at the most risk. We had to help tell the truth so that everyone could lead from where they sat. So you could lead your business or your nursing home or your school or your family's life, your prison, your homeless shelter. Every one of us had to lead things in ways we'd never done before. I can't tell you that people's first instincts in that moment was to save one another.
Yeah.
It wasn't the hate and vitriol we would come to know. And literally by telling the truth, that's how we dealt with it and actually got open earlier in our state. But the thing that sticks with me, and I've testified to this several times, is we have not mourned all we have lost. We did not make
Mhm.
meaning out of what we endured, and we didn't memorialize it. And every time in these lines, I still have parents coming up showing me kids who died in their picture, people talking about things they went through on the front lines. I had a woman last night, just in a thing I was in, talking about what it was like to be in the ICU, watching people wherever you do everything you could and they would suffocate in front of you. And when I say this, it's to say we have a lot of heroes and great people out there who are on the line, and we never thanked them. We never made meaning of their sacrifices. And I think leaders' words matter. I think our words matter. And we need leaders and public servants again. And I can't tell you enough, people don't much even care what party you are at this point. They wanna know you care and that you're gonna fight for them on the things that
That's
matter,
exactly
and
right.
that you're gonna tell them the truth, and you're gonna walk alongside of them. Because the world we live in is complex, it is nuanced, and it's hard right now, and I think we need each other.
Yeah. I you are speaking the gospel right now because bottom line, I've always said people want to know that you see them, that you hear them, but most importantly, that you value them. And right now, I think that you will fight for them. And
Yeah,
many times, I think so many folks feel alone right now in this world. They feel like they are only there for themselves, and they can only stick to their set family.
yeah,
But I think what we need particularly, and this is not just relegated to the Democratic Party. I think what we need in this country
right,
are leaders who will step up and fight for all of us.
right.
And it's few and far between. Now, you've worn a lot of hats.
Yeah,
You're a doctor, you've been a professor, a director of Ohio's Department of Health. You worked for a Republican for one time, a Republican governor. And
right,
now you are a candidate for governor running as a Democrat.
right.
What made you decide to step from public health into public office?
We joke around on the campaign a bit that, I'm a doctor, I'm not a politician, but I'm a lifelong public servant. And my last election was literally in high school, so that I ran for office. I ran for student council president, and we won that race, so we're 1 for 1. But when I say public servant, I'm a very special kind of doctor. I started out my career actually I've been most of my life in Ohio, but I did residency training in the Bronx. 1990, it turned out to be the crack cocaine epidemic, and half of the kids in my peds practice were gonna be dead by the age of 3 from getting
Mm,
HIV in utero. I had become a doctor out of this childhood. One time in my very chaotic childhood, I got an appendicitis bursting, and I was in the hospital for, like, 10 days, because back then you stayed in the hospital a while, and as you can imagine, when you're a kid that's not getting enough to eat and not safe, and that was such a nurturing, great place, the nurses and the doctors, and I just got this feeling of like, "Oh, if I could ever be this, this is what I wanna be." But here I am being a traditional doctor, and I can't stop the bad things, like, I'm seeing everything much too late. So then I discovered this field called preventive medicine and public health, where actually whole communities are your patient or a whole state, or if you're a whole country sometimes, and you're literally trained in all the systems that affect our well-being, including government. I've literally trained to do all the levers that a governor actually runs. what public health is, if I could just say, because I think this is so important in a time with RFK and all the craziness going on, that we kind of reset in a basic way about what this work is. We gained 30 years life expectancy in the last century. When you were born in 1900, you were expected to live on average to 48 years of age.
Mm.
My grandfather was born in 1900. He came from the old country to work in the steel mills in Youngstown for a better life. He actually lived to 84. Of those 30 years we gained, only 5 of them are due to everything I learned in med school, the kinds of things that you and I can control that are in our individual control, those choices about the red velvet cake versus your vaccine right now, okay? We can control that, right? 25 of the years we gained in 1 century came from things we have to solve together. It's what we need government for. It's actually why we have government. There are these things that, like clean water and a safe food supply and child labor laws and traffic safety laws and public schools and all of these other things that we have to solve in this political, but more political, I would say even governmental, but
Mhm.
cross systems and in philanthropy and academia and in business. All of us have to come together, but government is the convener of solving those big, hard, wicked problems that we're facing now. And we're for the first time ever going backwards on our life expectancy in this country and absolutely in my state. And that's the thing. I've been trained to work those levers. I've been honored to work with governors on both sides of the aisle. In COVID, we ran all of government, and really all the private sector rowing with us and in a crisis. These are the social, what they call the social, environmental, and economic determinants of our quality of life and well-being. And without people stewarding that well, it doesn't go well for us. And at a time when they're talking dark state, it drives me insane, Jamie. I don't know about you, but dark state is what we're seeing now. Using the levers of our public good and government to enrich yourself and special interests and others, that to me is dark. The work that public servants do every day on our behalf is the work of making us all have the greatest possible life we can have and reach our full potential. So that's actually what I've been trained to do.
Was there a moment in which the light just turned on for you and you said, okay, I think I want to do public office because I think all the things that you've been talking about, the dark state and seeing that, right? And being an observer of that. But was there like that one moment in which you said, and you know what? I'm running for governor. Like what was that pivot?
There was. You know, it's I'll give you the foreground of the moment because it matters, but in COVID, when I was on air every single day for an hour and a half, both sides of the aisle started polling me. I didn't even know why would you poll somebody who had been appointed? It turned out that I had a really unique constituency that doesn't know party. It goes from the far right to the far left, everything in between. I started being approached to run for office. My husband, who's a 43-year elementary school teacher and a coach, and we live a normal life like the
Mm-hmm.
rest of us, were approached by folks. I started learning. I didn't jump at it right away. I had a lot of questions. I learned from a lot of people. I spent a lot of time, David Pepper being one of many people I learned from. But in the presidential election, watching that fact that my state is going backwards on nearly every measure in our state, people are suffering. They're really suffering in my state right now. Watching where this country was going and knowing what I learned from COVID all too well, that this isn't a drill. I experienced a president who tweeted activate and liberate in April of 2020, and we saw militia cells be activated during that time. We would later see them at January 6th. I saw them in Charlottesville. You see under the hood of this country, and you realize what we're facing isn't a drill. And then when I saw where this was going, and I realized that I had been given an opportunity and a voice that I couldn't have created as a politician if I wanted to, it came from this experience with the people of my state. And sure enough, those numbers haven't changed. They've only grown stronger in the time since. And I realized if I could jar this door open and get a lot of great people inspired to come serve again,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe we'd have a chance of turning this around. And it's a hard decision, Jamie. I know you went through this, and I watched you. I was rooting for you when you were running, for senator. You know, a lot of us were watching you. I was so inspired by you because you did it differently. You had this very crowdsourced, people-based power way about you, and I don't think these power differentials we're seeing right now are ever gonna end. We're living in this operative world, you know it, you just worked in it. Assassin-like amounts of money since Citizens United. It is scorched earth. But the only thing in history that has ever broken this kind of power dynamic is when enough of the ordinary, everyday people can link arms, the bystanders link arms and push back, whether it was the 1870s or the
Mhm.
1930s. If it's bullying in your school, it takes the bystanders kinda having the courage together. I absolutely believe we're living in a moment now where we all can't look the other way, and that's why I'm running, and my hope is that enough of us are building a movement in Ohio to push back.
Yeah, you mentioned courage, and, courage is such an, I think, important attribute to
Yeah.
have right now in our body politic. It is scary right now to be a
Yeah.
public servant. It's scary to run for office right now. And, I've been in politics long enough to see that courage sometimes gets punished before it gets praised. But courage also reveals who you really are. And you were just awarded the Profile in Courage Award recently.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
What
honored
does
by yeah.
courage look like for you? You showed it during the period of COVID, but in this run for governor of Ohio, what what is courage for you, and how do you keep it?
You know, you're right, I had to take a stand during COVID against some bad actors in our state house, particularly Speaker of the House who wanted orders that would frankly hurt people, and by way of background, quarantine powers were 100 and some years old in this country, right? They're
Mhm.
for the doctor to do so that it's not political, but it was being made political, as you know. And I couldn't sign as a doctor with a Hippocratic oath, I couldn't sign things that I know would hurt people. And I didn't sign those orders. I told my governor that I'd keep advising him, which I have actually up through running. I've still weighed in on things, but I never signed those orders. That Speaker of the House was arrested 2 weeks later in the largest scandal in Ohio's history, $60 million in bribes. He's now in federal prison. JFK's book, Profiles in Courage, was about senators, other folks standing up. We know people lose their jobs when they take a stand. We know many people have lost their lives to take a stand. But what I say about courage is, it doesn't mean you don't feel fear. Courage comes from the root word heart, core. It's what heart comes from. And what I think it is, Jamie, is about opening your heart when you see suffering and things you can't unsee. I'm born with a little problem that I see things. Sometimes I want to not see them too, but I see them. I can't unsee them. And then it's a decision where you're just like, I'm not gonna look the other way, but where I get the courage to run for governor, against a self-funding billionaire with friends like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and the scorched earth that is gonna be, my courage comes from the people of Ohio and the stories I'm hearing and the longings they're having. And I just saw the power of Ohioans when they were saving one another in my state. The heroism knew no bounds, and I just have this feeling that if I can hold this space again, where we can just put these hard cards on the table of what we're all dealing with. I just have this belief that the people are gonna be there, they're gonna have my back too, and that we're gonna link arms and push back, and we're gonna say to this guy, "You can't buy our state, you can't buy Ohio, and you can't buy us." And I can tell you from being on the ground, the crowds we're seeing, there are a lot of people who are feeling it now and are ready. They're ready to have something better in their lives. And I feel like my challenge and the courage I have to have is I'm building a great team. We're building infrastructure, like at our website, actonforgovernor.com. We literally are doing huddles. We've learned from Obama. We've learned from you. I bring you up all the time as an example of like, we can crowdsource this. Enough ordinary people can beat a billionaire. We can. And Deval Patrick, he gave me some tips. But we're literally building that infrastructure. We're not waiting for the coordinated campaign right before election. We got to go now.
Yeah.
And you know what? Enough people are hurting and ready to go. So that's what we're seeing. And we're going.
I mean, looking at your current leadership and looking at your opponent who you're running against, Vivek Ramaswamy looks like he's likely going to be the Republican nominee. What do you think you have to do in order to win in a state that, most pundits would say has been trending Republican over the years? It's no longer that Ohio, Ohio, Ohio that Tim Russert had on that whiteboard,
Yeah.
years ago. What is unique about you to get Ohio back into that middle, to be that purple state that many of us always knew that she has been and still is?
Yeah, we're very heavily gerrymandered right now, and that's gonna be a news story today of how bad it is here in Ohio. And, we've trended. We're slightly tinge of pink, I'd say. We're
Mhm.
really purple. We're very similar to Michigan. But we've had a very, very corrupt state house, a lot of bad actors in our state, and our state is suffering. We've gone backwards. Our health outcomes, our educational outcomes, our growth in GDP, all of it has gone backwards under this regime. And until that breaks in our state, I don't think it ever gets better for Ohio. What I think I bring that is different is I think I'm bringing a very clear voice of what Ohioans are talking about. I mean, Ohioans are talking about costs and affordability. They're talking about aging in place with dignity and property taxes. They're talking about housing and childcare. They're talking about being able to go to school, send their kid, and their kid comes home or going to church right now, right? They're talking about really basic things, none of which my corrupt state house worked on. They don't work on any of that to keep doing the stuff they're doing for special interests, and people are feeling it. But I have a very unique constituency that doesn't know party. We are in a neck and neck dead heat race with Vivek Ramaswamy right now. I'm a person who's never run for office, but I'm somebody that Ohioans are very, very attached to. And in fact, we're beating him in independents strongly right now, and we're seeing a lot of Republicans crossing over. So I think I have a very unique profile, a very unique history, and I think we're putting on the table the kinds of issues that as a doctor and a problem solver, Ohioans actually want public servants again who care about them and focus on the work that they need us to do. So I think that combination, look, it's going to be scorched earth in my state. I can't say enough. I'm very blessed. We've raised record amounts in the first 3 quarters for a Dem candidate. But Jamie, you'll appreciate this. We've actually the biggest record we have is the largest number of donors.
Mm.
We had more donors in a half a year than most statewide candidates in Ohio have ever seen in 2 years. It's coming from all 88 counties. We're actually receiving money from all over the country, but the grassroots gift averages around 24 bucks. But we got a lot of people. And I think if we can really just raise the money we need to do to fight this fight that we're doing, we're on a course to do, and we're on a course to get our message out, that the thing that'll finally beat this, because we've seen people raise a lot more money and still not win, the thing that is going to beat this is the people pushing back on this.
Yeah.
And I think we also have a very uniquely flawed opponent that's done a lot of things that I think Ohioans don't want to see happening in their
And
state.
and for those folks who, there are a lot of folks who are just trying to make ends meet, and they're like, pox on both houses, Democrats and Republicans, they're all the same, yada yada yada, and that is a sentiment that I heard when I was running
Yeah.
for U.S. Senate. Is a sentiment that I heard as chair of the DNC, but I know it is a sentiment that, and I've heard this in Ohio, in campaigning in Ohio for Sherrod the last time around.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people who said, Amy, you and Vivek are two sides of the same coin? What do you
Yeah.
say to those people about why you are different and why you need to be governor as opposed to Vivek Ramaswamy?
I frankly don't think Vivek and I have very much in common at all.
I agree.
Um, my opponent, we've been really tough right now, for example, on the Epstein files. We simply ask my opponent to join us in asking for the full release, again, as somebody who has been the victim of this sort of thing, of knowing what the victims were saying. Vivek ran for president saying that he would release and be transparent. And we literally, the day we called for that, were kicked off the X platform and censored.
Wow.
This guy has not answered questions on this, something he ran for president on. 95 days and counting, I think. He has still not answered a reporter's question. The way he has made his money, I've been out serving people, being a public servant my whole life to keep people healthy and well and have a good opportunity in their life. I'm going everywhere in my state. I'm a grassroots person. I work in community on the ground. I'm going places, frankly, Democrats haven't been in a long time.
Mm.
I've been on the ground for 2 years listening deeply to people. I'm going in communities that have not been talked to in a while, and on both sides of the aisle. And I think that's frankly a very, very different approach to running for office. So I think the contrast is very real. The data shows the contrast is very real in our research and our polling. And I think I have a unique ability to actually beat someone who is gonna be strong, but he's gonna be strong because he's got a lot of money.
And if we had to think about your vision, if Jim Clyburn often tells me, like, you can have this long, convoluted plan, but folks need to know three things. What are the three things that you want to do when you become governor of Ohio?
The biggest thing, they often say what you're saying, run on 3 issues,
Yeah.
right? These 3 things when you run for office. The sad truth, I would tell people, is a governor solves another issue every hour. But but I'm running on costs and affordability and getting the corruption to stop in my state and getting a whole new influx of public servants. I'm running on modernizing our government. In COVID, the disease reporting system was so old that we're running this crisis on that you could not code for it. In West Virginia, we ran on fax machine. We actually need a government that is modern and agile, just like you'd want your business to be, with the greatest talent in the world. We know that every kind of talent, our friends and neighbors, are the people doing this work, and we need them desperately to help turn my state around. And I say this too, the other side has some plans. The Democrats in my state, we don't have a plan. That was one of the questions I asked. Now, the other side's plans are these special interest playbook of extreme wealth and power and ideology against all the rest of us. This is not a party thing anymore. What I am seeing in my state is extreme, outlandish stuff being shoved through state houses, through state governments, and aren't about the people. We need to create the structures again so that we can be the healthiest state. We used to be one of the healthiest. We need to have the best educated students. My opponent took $10 million from a guy named Yas in Philadelphia to end public schools as we know it. Public schools saved my life as a kid. Ohio was built on an agreement when we formed in the Northwest Territory. We were going to be different than the East Coast, different than Europe. We were going to give everyone, every so many blocks of land were left for a public school because it would improve everyone's quality of life, improve the economy. That's an essential agreement we're not honoring in Ohio. That is something everyone in the state wants. Great health care, affordable housing, great education, and a diverse economic development plan. We are 45th in growth in GDP in my state, and our biggest export in our state is young people. So we got a lot of work to do. I'd love to keep it in 3 buckets,
Yeah.
but the fact is we got to get Democrats back in there. We go after gerrymandering again in 27. If we can't get it then, we go after it in 30 in the regular process, because what we need are great public servants serving the people of Ohio again. And that's the battle I have on my hands. When I win, it just begins.
Let's talk a little bit about where things currently stand right now, not only in Ohio, but across the country. We are seeing real cuts coming from the Trump administration to Health and Human Services. We see the decimation of HHS under RFK. We see the Department of Education and the things that are impacting there, how families with kids with disabilities are being impacted there because of cuts. And I think families, regardless of what state you're in, regardless if it's a blue, purple, or red state, they're all feeling it. And I know you've lived this. What are some of the things, what are some of the stories that you are hearing in Ohio right now in terms of, what people are experiencing because of what's the dysfunction in Washington, D.C.?
I like to say that Ohio is kind of the United States of Ohio.
Mm.
Our little state, and that's why it was such that bellwether thing. It's such a diverse state, but it really is a mini ecosystem of our country in terms of how it all lays itself out. And people everywhere are feeling healthcare costs. Look, we had a Republican governor expand Medicaid in our state because when people are uninsured, all of our health insurance goes up, and every one of us, just watch your insurance premiums right now. And the most vulnerable are being kicked off kids in foster care right now in our state. We have rural hospitals collapsing. We have an urban hospital collapsing right now. Hospitals are under duress. You mentioned disabilities. I have parents that are, at the end of their life, they have kids in group homes for disabilities. That funding is being cut. They don't know what's going to happen to their kid. People have to go an hour and 15 minutes in many parts of my state to deliver a baby right now or to have a cavity filled for their kid. We are already in duress, and these things are just going to crash these systems. We want there to be subsidies for Affordable Care Act. We want people to have health insurance. All the systems are stressed when they don't. 60% of Republicans want that. These are things that most people want. They don't want to see people that don't have health care. They don't want to see people starving. We have 1.4 million people right now with the SNAP coming into effect, the changes. And our food banks, our state legislature, and this federal government did cuts to the safety nets, the nonprofits that actually try to come in these times. So they were already barren on their food shelves. And then SNAP now is happening with the cuts. So people are feeling this. It's real. I can tell you, the reason I think we're going to have a movement of the people is because I already see people organizing everywhere. We've got retired school teachers who were kicked off their own pension board in Ohio. It's $100 billion in assets that teachers earned. My opponent says he's going to end teachers' unions. He has said this publicly. Like, they're ready and they're mobilizing. Vets and VAs have been under duress. Government workers are under duress, and government is the largest employer in many of our counties. Our agriculture, I'm spending a lot of time in rural and small town. With the tariff cuts, we're sitting on all these soybeans right now.
Yeah, the
People
soybean
already,
farmers are in
they're-
severe pain.
exactly. And quite frankly, this governorship in my state is the last stand for collective bargaining. People are hurting, they're feeling it, and I know they're ready to move and push back on this. And I can't say enough.
So, Amy, if you were governor today, because really our governors have been on the front line of
Yes.
pushing back, and we've seen it in a number of states. If you were governor today, what are one or two things that you would do right now that's different than your current governor to shield families from the kind of federal whiplash that we're seeing right now?
Absolutely, you're right. Governors on both sides of the aisle are pushing back on the chaos and the stuff coming out of DC. And, we face things like a deployment of our National Guard out of Ohio. Again, I always give the caveat that I am not hearing exactly everything that my governor currently is hearing. So you never have all the information as someone that isn't sitting in that desk. But I can tell you, governors everywhere, mayors everywhere, county commissioners everywhere on both parties, they're afraid. They're afraid to stand up because when you stand up, right now, everyone in our country is living in a please don't hurt me more mode instead of oh my God, what are we going to do to fight back and help our local communities and people be empowered to make a difference? Like, that's how they're living. When you don't do what this president wants, he holds back things. In COVID, he holds back your supplies. We're seeing that, right? So I see why people are making their decisions. But frankly, I was part of a deployment of National Guard during COVID. You don't do it for this. This is the wrong use of our military. These are things governors on both sides are pushing back on. There's so many things. We need a great attorney general in our state. We need a great secretary of state and a governor who can push back. And we've had basically a one-party state government rule, and we've watched the outcomes of what that gave us. And we need people in office who aren't afraid to push back using every lever you can. And a lot of it is what you said, Jaime. It's linking arms with other governors. And COVID, when this president did not lead, it was supposed to be led by the federal government. Republican governors got together outside the White House. They started sharing everything they knew because they didn't want their people to die. And then we reached across the aisle to Democratic governors, and we all started rowing. So it's going to take a lot of this word courage, and it means that you got to take some risks. But the way you can make smart risks is by doing it together. So
Mhm.
I think, in my state, we gotta jar this door open and get in the door and grab the levers that we can grab right away. In our state, we're fighting to get a couple more House members. We have a super majority in our legislature. We need our veto to be able to stand as a form of power. Governors, this as governor of Ohio, you have 54,000 employees, endless cabinets. You got to know where all these levers are. It's lawless in my state right now. You got to know all the boards and commissions. That's where a lot of stacking of bad stuff happens that most of us don't see every day that allow some of these bad actions to take place. We got to grab the levers right away. And it's going to be a fight.
Yeah.
We didn't get there overnight, and it's going to take a lot of us seeing that the moment we're living in isn't a drill. And I'm an ordinary person. I can't say enough, Jamie. I'm no like super powered person. I'm an ordinary person. But I think if enough of us have the ability to grab arms together and push back, we're gonna get through this time we're living in. But we need our states because the states are where they're pushing a lot, and the states can also be a place that can push back.
Well, let's go into a few specific areas, and I would love to get your again, your perception, your governor. How do you think you would handle this? Right now, SNAP and nutrition. We know what's at stake. Basically, Donald Trump is and his administration saying that they are probably not going to extend SNAP, even though they have the funds to do so. They may not. What would you do right now if you were governor in order to help families out?
Well, like any crisis, and that's what this is. This is a crisis. I want people to understand that a lot of people are gonna go hungry, and groceries were already unaffordable, and
Yeah.
people are making decisions of healthcare versus the electric bill. So this is gonna topple things. It is. And as governor, we see governors, I would be doing the same thing, mobilizing funds from wherever I could within the administration. Also, a big thing that we overlook that governors do is they have a great ability to convene and catalyze. You
Mm,
put the hard cards on the table, you get multi-system people around the table. So I'd be talking to the business community. Just had a great meeting with Kroger the other day. I'd be talking to our stores. I'd be talking to our philanthropies, our major philanthropies. And I've worked in these different sectors in academia. Even as a candidate running, we're looking at how we can raise money into our food banks because our food banks are already operating without the funds they normally have going into a really tough season. And then they're going to have this demand placed upon them too. So what a governor can do is give us the North Star. We've got the crisis here. You get the right people around the table. This is what I've been trained to do. That's how I ran COVID. And then we all row together as a state. And meanwhile, you're using your attorney general and every power to push back and fight this and sue where sue can and push back on these things because quite frankly, it's reckless, it's lawless what we're seeing.
yeah. Another issue right now, we are seeing a rise in terms of measles
Yes.
outbreaks across the country. And part of that is because we got somebody over at HHS who's an anti-vaxxer. How do we protect the science and regain public trust in that space?
Yeah, this is so essential. Again, when I say what our leaders' words matter, I really, really experienced this in COVID, that particularly when people are feeling vulnerable, and I'm telling you, everyone is feeling vulnerable. It's very easy to demonize someone who doesn't want to get vaccines. But when I'm a doctor, I'm for all patients, and I'm not firing a patient who doesn't want to get a vaccine. I am what people are when someone doesn't want a vaccine, they're worried about their kid. They're scared. They've gotten some bad information and they're trying to protect their kid. Most people, not all. Some people are using this politically, right? But that's not most moms I talk to. And I've got a lot of moms that are in the far right who like me even though they don't like vaccines because they know I care, okay? Because I've earned trust. We need leaders to tell credible information. I have said RFK is completely disqualified, but this is killing people to have this is such an important job and position. And those policies matter because these are our lives on the line and people will die because of reckless policy. We need people who put out things that folks can trust with information that is credible. So I think that's a huge job of governors. And again, I can't say enough. it's very quick to demonize people or to split us in this camp. But what we really need is someone who can pull us together and lay out the information so that people can make better choices for themselves. And I think that's the kind of governor I would be. And Jamie, a lot of it too is it's how we talk to people. I think people are afraid.
Yeah.
I can't say this enough. And they're trying to get information everywhere they can, and we've got bad actors purposely giving people bad information, and it's gonna take a lot of leadership to regain that trust from people, but I think that's what people are actually longing for.
Another issue that's really been plaguing communities for a while, and I think you came into the Department of Health focused on this before COVID hit, which is opioids.
Yes.
Where are we now on that particular issue? And what do you think has been missed in the national conversation about how we address opioids in the country?
Oh, you know, there's so much to talk about in the macro, but I think what I'll share with you is more what we did here in Ohio. Ohio was sort of one of the ground zeros early on. And one of the things I learned from the tobacco settlement, remember back in the tobacco settlement, when we've had times of crisis and addiction before, a lot of the money never actually went to treat addiction. It actually ended up filling potholes and covering government downturns. One of the things I'm proud of that we did differently in Ohio, when we recognized, and I worked for a major philanthropy, so we were doing everything we could at the beginning of the opiate epidemic. What we did this time is we actually got 88 counties, and this is what a governor can do. This is what I did with a Republican governor. We got 88 counties to agree to give up 50% of the opiate settlement, and we actually put it into an endowment. We got it outside of the regular process. We created a nonprofit. We put 50%, and believe me, counties needed cold hard cash. Like, they needed money back. They were out a lot of money from ambulances and all the kinds of things they had to pay for. But we actually all agreed in Ohio, by getting everybody around the table and having the hard conversations, to put some of it aside so that we live off of the interest.
Mm.
And that interest is gonna keep treating addiction in Ohio in perpetuity. That's a different way of thinking about solving problems. That's, I hope, the kind of governor I will be. That's how we did it in Ohio. And I think there's a lot we need to be doing and thinking a little bit outside the box on. There's so much we have to be doing to protecting what's coming in our states, obviously, and from a crime and a drug trafficking point of view, there's so many issues we deal with. But actually, we have to set up things that it can actually help the families that are going through so much still, and I'm proud of Ohio. We did something a little different, and I hope that pays off dividends into generations ahead.
Yeah. Well, you spoke earlier about being able to work across the aisle. You worked with Governor DeWine, who's a Republican, and I'm sure you had a great working relationship with him. Do you think any chance that he might quietly support you, or at least sit this one out?
Aw. Well, I can't tell you, much about what he would do, but I know he has a couple kids in Republican politics. I know he is a very loyal person in his party. We've continued to talk. We've worked on issues. We still talk. And I I think what I would say to folks about this, the time and the moment we're living in, and particularly in a state like Ohio, where we hope to be a purple state right now, you know, I'm still gonna have to work with this president when I'm governor. I'm still gonna have to work with this legislature. I worked
Yep.
with this president. We had a leaking uranium in Piketon, Ohio, from a decommissioning Cold War facility, and I worked with them, and actually, that's what gave me the ability to talk to McMulvaney in that room. Like, I had to work with them. I worked with this legislature, and even during COVID at a period where people were, trying to impeach both me and the Republican governor at one point and the antics they did, I was getting calls and cards, and I even got flowers from someone that was a part of that. I gotta work with people. I've always worked with people on both sides of the aisle because I'll work with anybody who's willing to solve the problems that Ohioans are suffering from. And that is what I want, and I'm gonna do everything in my power to inspire leaders. One of the problems of being a gerrymandered state is that the regular sort of Republicans that were willing to not be beholden to these special interests were the first to go when they gerrymandered Ohio, actually. It got more extreme. And I need good public servants back in here to help solve problems.
Yeah. Amy, every week on this podcast, we end with a little tradition. I don't know if your team prepped you for this, but
No,
it's
so you
called the
got
Sit
me.
Your Ass Down Award.
Okay.
And so the special award that we give out on this podcast every week. So who in politics or in public life just needs to take a seat this week and maybe do a little reflection? You sort of the sit in the corner award in public life or public policy. So you have the honor of naming the recipient of this week's Sit Your Ass Down award.
Oh, I'm I'm gonna talk to Democrats right now,
Okay.
and I think we need to sit our ass down and look this thing right in the eye of what we're dealing with. I know we're hurting. I worked alongside Sherrod Brown and Amy Klobuchar and a Supreme Court justice in our state who was Republican and bipartisan business groups to try to end gerrymandering in our state, and they rewrote the law so that people wanted to end gerrymandering voted the wrong way. I have been out there on the lines with candidates no one's ever heard of before, just trying to get a few more people to run for office. And this last election cycle was devastating, and we've been spending a lot of time reflecting, as we should. But I actually think there's more going on with us. And I think I can't say enough. All of us are carrying a lot inside right now. We can't even name it, but I'm seeing it in you. And one of a natural physiologic instinct when you are under this much duress and you are this worried about what is happening in your world, and we should all be very worried, is to start blaming other people. It's to start, you know, shutting down, saying we can never win, we could never do this. God, a woman could never win. Somebody's not tough enough. I get that all the time. Jamie, I didn't get through my childhood if I wasn't tough enough.
No, I amen to that.
But the fact is, we may be becoming our own worst enemy if we keep being in the defeatist way. This is go time now. 26 is going to be an incredible cycle. I can't say enough. I'm seeing record crowds on the ground of the state that people have given up on, including Democrats have given up on. And I'm telling you, this isn't the time. You can't sit in that seat on your ass now. It's time to get up and fight for what is right and what is just. And that is this moment. So quit this hitting on each other stuff. It's go time.
So,
And that's
so,
what
so in essence, it's not a sit your ass down, it's get your ass up. Get,
Yeah,
Democrats,
I'm
get your
tired of
ass
hearing
up.
that. Let's
Get your ass
go.
up.
Yeah, we gotta fight, and I need you. Gotta have my back out here. So come help us. Actonforgovernor.com. Come help us.
I love that. I love that.
Wow, great. We'll take you.
So, folks,
Yeah.
Dr. Acton has changed the award this week. It's not sit your ass down, it's get your ass up. Well, my last question for you is, you've lived through poverty, you've lived through abuse, you've lived through public scorn, but you still chose hope. What does that say about who we can be as a country, who we can be as a party, but who you will be as governor of Ohio?
I've been thinking about hope a lot, and don't laugh at me, but even in my bedroom, I still have Obama's poster up, all right? So this is hope. Jane Goodall's book she just put out, I got through life as a child. There was a time my brother and I were kept in a dark basement, light bulb, 2 twin beds, a sump pump. But I'd bring a book home every single day from the library. I'd read through that whole book, and I knew life could be different. So hope got baked in me somehow. And I kind of, every time the world gets the most crazy, chaotic, awful like it is right now, I see the pots of gold laying right in it. And sometimes when it crashes is when the next great leap goes forward. Because it's breaking apart some of the things that have been holding us back, even in its breaking apart. Right now are the seeds in the next great wonder. My definition of hope is optimism plus a plan. I actually see an equation. I'm like, optimism plus plan. We need a plan. And in my state, that's what I'm working on, a plan where we're the healthiest again. We are the best world-class educated and trained, where we have great businesses. And I'm actually telling people, quit just stopping the bad stuff. We got to actually know that we can have nice things again. We should have leaders who are saying things like my state could be the world's greatest integrated park system. I sit on all the assets of a huge economic driver and something that would help our health and well-being. And we actually learned in COVID that nature was something we all discovered again, that we could be driving things like that. And that's the thing. We actually need, as Democrats, a plan and a strategy. And I think, what the people are telling us are listen deeply to us, come everywhere again. No, I know we're doing operative politics, but we need that old school retail kind of hope again. And, we need that old school politics back a little bit too, where we just have relationships again. And that's our way out of it. The relationships are giving me hope. The people are giving me so much hope. And I think we could be very, very surprised if we create these movement energies again like you did, Jaime. I think we need to crowdsource this one.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Acton, we are, and I say this all the time, the other side is their superpower has been fear, but
Yeah.
our superpower has always been hope, and we are the
Hope and
party of hope.
And I just want to say something, love. And then we
Yes.
shouldn't be afraid of saying it because we are dying from a lack of our connection, human connection and relationships. And kindness should not be mistaken for weakness. And that is a big mistake that is going on right now in every world religion, in all societies. It's a fierce thing of justice and seeing humanity in one another. Our biggest North Star right now is our common humanity. They are purposely pulling us apart, and we got to bind back up and push back.
I love that.
That is what's actually at stake.
Well, just think about this, folks. From a tent to very possibly, if we all do our part, to the governor's mansion. Dr. Acton, your story really reminds us that resilience is political and courage and empathy are power. And I am so, so happy that we got an opportunity to get to hear from you, to hear your story, to hear your vision for Ohio. And I am just grateful that you came to have a seat at our table. So thank you so much for being with us. It's remarkable. And I look forward to possibly coming to Ohio so I can do some campaigning, some knocking on some doors.
Yes, we're getting
our asses up off the seat, folks.
Off the seat.
Let's go knock on some doors. Let's make some phone calls. Let's send in some checks because we need to make sure that Dr. Acton becomes the next great governor from the great state of Ohio, Ohio, Ohio.
To Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Acton. And thank you again for being at our table. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, find us at ourtablepodcast.com. At Our Table with Jaime Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hayter and Jaime Harrison. Our producers are Kyle Kelly and Emily Harrell. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Lauren Brown. Courtney Reamer of Sounds Great Strategies is our creative consultant. Neil Rossini of FWRV LLP provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. Special thanks to Dr. Amy Acton and her team. I'm Jaime Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.